Radio with Paul Harrell.
Let's welcome to the program. We've got Mr. Tim Jacob on the phone. Tim, it's always great to have you on, sir. You're a term limits advocate. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for allowing me to be on this morning.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure. You know, listen, I think term limits is a good idea. I think taking it from 16 down to 10 is a good idea. I know there are other people that disagree. They can make arguments to the contrary, and, I respect those people, and I can respectfully disagree with them and agree to disagree and hopefully work together on other issues. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. There does seem to be some legislators out there who are, coming out and saying, listen, we think this is a terrible idea.
Well, I think it's a great thing, and I'm very grateful that we're having this debate this time, because in 2014, when the legislature put through that fraudulent amendment and deceptive amendment, we did not have that debate. So I'm glad that after a 3-year bout of laryngitis that some of them have gotten their voice back. And I think it's a healthy when we debate this statewide. Good people can disagree about this, but everyone can agree that deception does not work in Arkansas and has no place in Arkansas politics. And that's exactly what the legislature and the lobbyists did in 2014.
And that is a great point, and I feel like that to me is the one reason, is probably my biggest motivator to vote for this. Aside from the fact, at the end of the day, it's like, hey, do you think 16 years is good, or do you think a decade is good? And I'm like, okay, a decade's fine. Let's, you go past a decade, it really can become a career, and not for career politicians. But the main thing here, and I've been trying to talk about this a little bit, is that what John Woods did, and, convicted felon John Woods, and now really the rest of the General Assembly too, and I know there were people that did speak out against it at the time, but like you said, there wasn't this kind of debate that we're having right now. Now we're having a much broader debate with more people involved. Our own government lied to the people intentionally. They intentionally, we can blame most of it on John Woods, but the fact is the rest of the General Assembly voted for it. They voted for the title, and it went there. It was deceptive, and our own government lied to us, and now the people are taking the pendulum, and we're attempting to swing it back. And I don't think anybody should be surprised by that. I think that's a healthy thing.
I tend to agree with you. I think it's very healthy, and let's be sure to point out that senators can now stay 22 years, depending on how those 2-year terms fall. 22 years is not a term limit. That's a limit that anybody who doesn't believe in term limits could live with. So it's gone from 22, and here is the question Arkansas voters have to ask themselves. Do we want to live by an amendment written in silence by a convicted felon who's defrauded the state of Arkansas, or are we going to have an amendment written by the people that, in most part, has already won 2 landslide elections?
Mm-hmm.
We've got to decide whether the legislature is going to set their own terms or the people are going to have to say so. The biggest problem with this issue is that we've had 2 statewide landslide elections, and the so-called representatives of the people do not represent the people. They have not accepted the will of the people. They have not accepted the vote. They haven't respected voters, and they haven't respected the vote. And we have to get back to that situation here.
One of the, negative aspects of this, according to the opponents of this term limits initiative that's on the ballot, is that bureaucrats will be empowered, and that bureaucrats love the idea of term limits because they are able to trick and dupe ignorant legislators who don't have a grasp of how things work when they first get down there. Can you respond to that criticism?
Nothing could be further from the truth. No bureaucratic organization has ever supported strict term limits. In fact, they've worked, if you look at the 2004 campaign that we ran statewide, that 75 out of 75 counties said no to the legislature. Where did the bureaucratic organizations fall in that funding? They fell on the side of the legislators. Same thing goes with lobbyists. I hear lobbyists are going to gain power and they're going to have control over freshmen. Well, lobbyists
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Note to all attorneys out there. Note to all attorneys, if you are going to be an attorney and you're going to practice law, that means you're going to have clients. You're going to want to make sure that your client, whoever he or she is, doesn't have presidential aspirations. Because if that person does, and they succeed, and they are anti-status quo, and they shake things up, not only will your law office get raided, but you're going to wind up pleading guilty. And it's going to be, you're basically going to be sacrificed because your client was elected president, and a whole lot of people who are entrenched in bureaucracy or the deep state don't like that person. I'm just telling you, I know there's a lot of attorneys who listen to this program. If you are an attorney and you want to practice law, you might want to start screening your candidates, or your clients, and ask them, do you have presidential aspirations, and do you think outside the box? If the answer is yes to both of those questions, maybe you shouldn't represent them because you're going to wind up pleading guilty. The phone number this morning is 870-275-9799. If you would like to contribute to the program, that's 870-275-9799. We are broadcasting across stations across the state as well as across multiple digital platforms. One of the popular ones is over at facebook.com/Conduit News, as well as YouTube. If you go to the YouTube, please subscribe, click the little bell for notifications, and also at the brand new conduitnews.com. That's conduitnews.com, where I understand that there is some news, and we're going to get to this coming up at 6:30. That has to do with the trial over in Greenbrier. Kirby Ward was found not guilty on carrying a weapon charge in Greenbrier. The judge finds that Ward was on a journey as he was traveling from another county. The judge stated that Act 746 causes confusion and did not rule on unlawful intent portion of the statute. I'm sure Mr. Tim Loggins from Patriots of Act 746 going to have a lot to say about that. That's coming up at 6:33. Then at 7:05, I want to just kind of go over this very extensive piece written by David Ramsey over the Arkansas Times, reminding us of the culture of corruption that is evident here in the state of Arkansas, reminding us about Senator Jeremy Hutchinson, who has yet to be charged, reminding us about former Senator and former Governor's Chief of Staff Michael Lamoureux, who has yet to be charged, in what has become, we just see the corruption play out in the headlines almost on a daily basis sometimes. We've kind of had a dead period for the last couple of weeks. But when you look at this concept of being an attorney using a loophole in the state law, there may not be a loophole in the federal law, though. We'll talk more about that at 7:05. Then at 7:33, Maria Espinoza. Maria Espinoza, we've had her on the program before. She's from the Remembrance Project. This is a project that exists to remember those individuals who have been murdered by illegal aliens, pointing out that this is a preventable crime if we would just secure our borders. Obviously, the news yesterday broke that an illegal alien has been charged with the first-degree murder of a lady named Molly Tibbetts. She was abducted, went missing from her small town of Brooklyn, Iowa. She's a 20-year-old college student, and she was found in a cornfield dead. An illegal alien is guilty of committing the crime. Maria is charged, I should say. I should say charged. They have surveillance footage of committing the crime. And we're going to be talking with Maria Espinosa about that coming up at 7:33. A very relevant topic. We had her scheduled originally to talk about the left's outrage when it came to this guy who was driving his pregnant wife to the emergency room to have their baby, and he got arrested by ICE, and everybody was freaking out about it. It turns out he was wanted for murder. So, pretty sure we all, I don't care if your wife's in labor, you're wanted for murder. You're coming with us, buddy. I mean, that's just the way the law works, isn't it? Okay, so we got all that and more. Let's start with the national news. What I said, the opening line here about attorneys. Okay, it was a very busy news day yesterday, late in the day, when it came to Paul Manafort being found guilty, not on all charges. But then you had Richard Cohen, the president's former attorney, and he essentially pled guilty to violating campaign finance laws. Now, from what I can tell, he did not plead guilty to violating federal election laws. He pled guilty to violating campaign finance laws. Now, I could be wrong about that, but that was my first question in all of this, because I was reading some media reports, and they were saying they were alluding to federal election laws being broken, but those were never in actual quotes. But campaign finance law was in actual quotes, okay? And it has to do with the hush payments to these women. And he says, hey, look, President Trump told me to do this, or a candidate told me to do this, and everything else. There's a lot here. Now, the first thing that I think we have to talk about, okay, is Russia, right? We have to talk about Russia, right? Because, the reason I say that is because that's what this whole thing was, correct? This whole thing started as the left would say, well, it's a national security risk. We've got to know if Russia and the Trump campaign or Donald Trump himself we've got to know if he's a Russian agent. We've got to know if he somehow has some sort of affinity for the KGB. We have to figure this out, because it's a matter of national security. So we need a special counsel to investigate this because it's about Russia. And then, of course, as things start going on, you have the House Intelligence Community. Well, they start investigating Russia. Oh, and what they find, something a little different. They start figuring out, hey, well, there was some very strange justification for spying on the Trump campaign. Do you remember President Trump comes out and he says they were wiretapping the Trump Tower, and the media mocks him. And then we find out that actually was true. And so you would think that if you're going to have a conviction in the Paul Manafort case, right, then this is going to be about Russia, because this is what started the whole special counsel Robert Mueller probe. It's going to be about Russia. And instead they convict Paul Manafort because he did some stuff financially, bank fraud or whatever, a long time before Trump even announced his candidacy. So they get him on something a long time ago. Again, hey, I guess if you're a lobbyist like Paul Manafort essentially was, especially after Reagan got elected, him and Roger Stone, I guess, you know what? You can be a lobbyist. You can operate in the swamp just so long as you don't ever help a guy who thinks outside the box and is anti-status quo. If you do that, we're going to unleash the full power and might of the deep state in the justice system on you. I mean, I don't see how anybody can think otherwise at this point. In terms of, okay, President Trump won. He's the president now. Let's go after literally everybody who contributed and made that happen. That's why they're going to go after Roger Stone next. And honestly, I don't know if anybody, I would, if any of you still have Netflix, because I do, I admit I still have Netflix, and I know Susan Rice got put on the board and everything else. But there's a documentary on Netflix called Get Me Roger Stone. I've watched it. It was a fascinating documentary. But it talked about Roger Stone and Paul Manafort, among other people. Oh, you know who also is talked about in that documentary? Alex Jones. It's funny. It's almost like that documentary. They followed around the presidential campaign of 2016, and Roger Stone specifically. It's almost like that documentary is essentially just saying, here are your targets and what's happened with Alex Jones and InfoWars. Well, they've been deplatformed, okay? Now they've gone after Paul Manafort, and now they're trying to go after Roger Stone. Go watch that documentary and tell me that the documentary itself is not painting targets on these people's backs. And they're essentially outraged. They cannot believe that President Donald Trump won. They never thought he would win. And he did. And so it's all about Russia. But no, it's not about Russia anymore. It's about the fact that Donald Trump or this lawyer paid off these women who were, wanting money because they had a relationship with President Donald Trump. Or, well, not President Trump, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, that's a far cry. That is a far cry from what this thing started out as. So when President Trump calls it a witch hunt, rightfully so, that's exactly what this is at this point, okay? That's again, if you're an attorney, you need to make sure that your clients don't have presidential aspirations, and if they do have presidential aspirations, are they outside-the-box thinkers? Do they want to shake things up? Do they want to run the country like a business? If they want to do those things, you probably should never represent them because your law offices are going to be raided. It's just inevitable. Okay, look at this headline. President Trump has reacted to Paul Manafort, Michael Cohen verdicts. He says no Russia collusion. Now, he's exactly right. He spoke to reporters, and he said this, I feel badly for him. President Trump said, I must tell you that Paul Manafort's a good man. He was with Ronald Reagan. He was with a lot of different people over the years, and I feel very sad about that. It doesn't involve me, but I still feel, it's very sad. It's a very sad thing that's happened. This has nothing to do with Russia collusion. This started as Russia collusion. This has absolutely nothing to do. It's a witch hunt, and it's a disgrace. This has nothing to do with what they started out looking for Russians involved in our campaign. There were none. I feel badly for Paul Manafort. Again, he worked for Bob Dole. He worked for Ronald Reagan. He worked for many people. And this is the way it ends up. And it was not the original mission, believe me. It was something very different. So it had nothing to do with Russian collusion. We continue the witch hunt. Thank you very much. Over at Breitbart News, they also have another article here. Donald Trump, Paul Manafort case sad but doesn't involve me. That's Charlie Spearing there. President Trump said that his former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, was a good man, but stressed that his conviction on Tuesday did not involve the campaign. It's interesting to me, the optics of the Cohen situation, right? Because if this had just been Paul Manafort, right, being found guilty on some counts, but it had nothing to do with Russia, that would be kind of a failure this morning, wouldn't it? But you had the Manafort jury. They deliberated for how long? What did they deliberate for? Over 30 hours. They thought that this was going to be an open and shut case. I remember people were wanting the verdict to come out on Friday. It didn't come out on Friday. Here we are Wednesday morning, so it came out on Tuesday. Do you think that the whole guilty plea with Cohen was kind of just put in a glass case waiting for the Manafort verdict? I do. I mean, look at the timing of this. If you don't think there's a controlled narrative here, you're crazy. Paul Manafort is found guilty, but not of Russian collusion. Well, instead of that being the story, what do? They make sure that the day the verdict comes out with Paul Manafort, Cohen goes ahead and pleads. Think about that for a second. Do you not see the coordination here? I don't know what the media is afraid of. I mean, they're obviously afraid of people figuring things out for themselves, I'll tell you that much. Well, I'm sorry, that's not a rebuke of the media in and of itself. What I meant to say was the deep state here. I mean, this is clearly a coordination. They use the media. They use the media to their advantage. Of course, the media wants Donald Trump impeached. And speaking of impeachment, you have billionaire Tom Steyer, after the news yesterday, calls for the impeachment, and they want to invigorate this. This is all about winning the House, too, okay? So there's a lot of talk about the Mueller investigation needing to cool off about right now. Basically, at the end of August, the what you have heard floated is that the Mueller investigation doesn't need to continue anymore because it may influence the elections, the midterm elections in November. So this may be the big one last push to try to, and then of course you have your social media people that are censoring conservatives. They're deplatforming it's now more than just InfoWars or Alex Jones. I mean, it's more people. And, you have this thing that's rolling here, and they're trying to take back the House. They have to have the Democrats take back the House so that they can attempt to impeach Trump. And then, of course, they'd also have to take the Senate as well. I mean, it's a long shot, but they can certainly hurt the Trump agenda. I mean, that's why people in Arkansas, for example, those of you who are listening on The Answer 101.1, out of Little Rock right now, you're listening to the program. We really appreciate it, but you guys got to do everything you can to make sure that Congressman Fringe Hill stays Congressman Fringe Hill, because that needs to be a Republican seat. Because if you go with the Democrat, Clark Tucker, he's going to side. I don't care what he says. He's going to side with Nancy Pelosi when push comes to shove. Okay, he's going to side with the Democratic establishment when push comes to shove. He's going to go along with impeaching President Donald Trump. Okay, he's going to go along with this idea eventually, because the party goes along with it. Oh, that Trump is some sort of KGB Russian agent, and that the votes of the people of Arkansas were illegitimate. I mean, that's what they're trying to say here. That's what this Cohen plea is all about. Michael Cohen pleads that he violated campaign finance laws. That's what his plea is. But I did it to sway an election. I did it to sway an election, meaning, think about how preposterous this is. Okay? We all heard tapes of President Donald Trump with the locker room talk. You remember that? And they want you to believe that if we had something else that came out, a month before the election saying that President Donald Trump, 10 years ago or whatever it was, 15 years ago, had an affair, that we'd all be shocked. Everybody, this was not like Ted Cruz had gotten the nomination or somebody else. Everybody knew who Donald Trump was. Everybody knew he was a billionaire from New York. His message resonated because of the substance of what he was saying he was going to do, not what he had done in the past, not how he had failed in the past or messed up in the past. And everybody knows that. That's why President Donald Trump has such resistance to these attacks, because the media tries to take the moral high ground when the mainstream media itself is immoral because they are actively trying to deceive the American people. We got to take a break. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. We're going to be talking with Mr. Tim Loggins from Patriots of Act 746 coming up at 6:33. Tell me what you think about all of this. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can sound off over on the YouTube page as well as Facebook.com/Conduit News. Back in just a moment.
Don't support these term limits. In fact, one of the bigger lobbyists is now heading the opposition against this term limit bill. It's a fallacy to think that bureaucrats or lobbyists ever support strict term limits. They gain their power by attaching themselves to long-term incumbents. If we want a citizen legislature, not career politicians, we need to vote for issue 3.
Let me ask you this, because you just said something that I've never actually thought about before. You said lobbyists, but let's talk about the bureaucrats. You think that's true with bureaucrats,
Sure.
that bureaucrats gain their power by forging relationships with those in power, similar to lobbyists?
Of course I did, yeah.
Wow.
And one of the proof's in the pudding. Never has any bureaucratic organization ever been on the side of strict term limits. Look at the 2004 campaign. Look where the state employees union came.
In Arkansas, every single hour there is a politician not getting what they want. For some, it's an absolute nightmare. The sleepless nights wondering if progress will ever come. Lying awake pondering how to grow government in this political climate. Asking questions like, why don't my constituents want to pay a few cents more in taxes? Everyday politicians feel abused and neglected. These politicians are starving for power. They're hungry, confused, and they don't understand why no one seems to care. Will you be a patriot and commit today to help these poor, starved for power public officials? It's simple. All you have to do is commit to stay silent and never dissent or stand in the way of your politicians' rise to power. Never speak up or get engaged to stop the growth of government. By committing to these simple steps, you will ensure the life of your politician will be filled with contentment and the respect they are desperately seeking, as well as campaign contributions from lobbyists.
This message brought to you by Aristocrats Serving Arkansas.
PHP Parody.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yeah, somebody on the Facebook page mentioned a point here. Somebody on the Facebook page is writing that, don't remember that a lot of these charges that they brought against Manafort were charges that a prosecutor, years ago decided not to run with in the first place. So, this is it's just a scalp. That's all this is. Hey, did you hear that ICE, at the direction of President Donald Trump, deported a Nazi death camp guard? Did you hear this? ABC News had this story. It was interesting, to say the least. And this had to do with President Donald Trump telling our diplomat to Germany to essentially constantly hound the squeaky wheel gets the grease in this situation, saying, Germany, you're going to take this guy back. He's a Nazi. He's a Nazi collaborator. He was doing this under the direction of the German government at the time. You guys need to take him back, and he has been deported to Germany. At the order of President Donald Trump, Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents removed a 95-year-old person. I can't really pronounce his name, Jackie or something, from Queens, New York. Look, that's the picture of him when he's young. Look at that. Justice Department officials say he served as an armed guard at a death camp in Nazi-occupied Poland and later lied to American immigration officials about his role in those atrocities. This led the GQ writer to essentially claim a conspiracy but then backtrack and say he was just making a joke. He says that ICE decided to deport this Nazi to make themselves look noble and heroic because, more people are, against Nazis, I guess. By the way, I thought President Trump was supposed to be a Nazi, according to the left. Boy, don't you know they hate the fact that he just deported one, an actual Nazi. His name is Nathaniel Friedman. He spread the conspiracy theory Tuesday, according to John Nolte, that the former Nazi SS guard deported by Trump administration is a plant to make ICE look noble and heroic. In a follow-up tweet, Friedman tweeted cowards, which apparently refers to ICE. The Democrat Party wants to abolish ICE, wants to get rid of ICE, doesn't want them to do their jobs. Just unbelievable. And this is the party that wants to impeach Donald Trump. It is so important. The midterms are coming up. It is so important that you get every person that you can out to the polls, especially if you are in the 2nd District of Arkansas, where you have French Hill, who is a Republican who needs to remain in Congress out there. When we come back, we'll be talking with Patriots of Act 746, Tim Loggins, on the Greenbrier case. Kirby Ward was found not guilty yesterday. That's a good thing, but we'll tell you about the political motivations here.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I didn't know that.
If they support us, Why would they always give money to our opposition? And legislators know this. They might say that see, lobbyists and bureaucrats have a different job, and they're both needed, but they don't need to be kingmakers. They need to give information to legislators so legislators can make a good decision when representing their constituents. But they don't need to be kingmakers, and they don't need to ensure a political career. Term limits is a great, healthy, reasonable way to bring legislators back to a more representative nature. We want them to represent the people in their district, not lobbyists and not bureaucrats.
You know, we're talking with Tim Jacob. He's a term limits advocate. He's instrumental in getting this thing on the ballot. That is issue 3. I think it's interesting that it's issue 3 on the ballot, and John Woods, lied to the people with his own issue 3. So that's fascinating. In 10 years, I feel like is a long enough time, and I know I'm not a legislator, and that's one of the criticisms. Well, you don't know, you haven't been down there. I will say what has been interesting about the debate that's being had is when the other side comes and they say that the argument of 10 years isn't long enough to get a handle on things. Is that not a rebuke of just how dysfunctional the situation is and how our representatives really aren't representing us if the government is so bad and so big that over a 10-year period you can't get anything done, you can't reform, you can't do what the people sent you down there to do?
Well, and I think a lot of progress happens in your freshman term, just because then you're coming with fresh ideas. You're representing your constituents more at that time. The folks that say 10 years isn't long enough, do they believe in the presidential term limit? Certainly the president has more to learn. Certainly the president has more responsibilities, and we're limiting the president to 8 years. Mm-hmm. Every statewide office except a legislator has a lower limit. It's 8 years for auditor, for lieutenant governor, for governor. And legislators under this amendment will get 10 years. I would say that they need to hit the ground running, do the best they can, but allow the voters to decide how long the term limit is. That shouldn't be done with lobbyists and legislators in a closed-door meeting. That shouldn't be done with a campaign of silence where the voters aren't even informed that it's on the ballot. What happened in 2014 cannot stand. We're going to have a choice between an amendment that was written by a convicted felon or an amendment.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I want to remind you that this portion of the program brought to you by the Patriots of Act 746. We really appreciate them. They are on a mission to educate you about your Second Amendment rights, specifically what your Arkansas constitutional gun rights are, what the law says, what the law doesn't say. It's Act 746, the Patriots of Act 746. Go to Facebook.com and search for Patriots of Act 746 and ask to become a member of that group. It is an online sensation growing every single week with people who want to know what their rights are. The fact is, the possession of a weapon in Arkansas has been decriminalized to the point where the burden of proof is extremely, extremely high. They have to be able to prove that you are going to unlawfully deploy your weapon against another person illegally, and that's a very difficult thing to prove. So, that's what Act 746 does. Here to talk more about that and the news of the day, we have Mr. Tim Loggins with the Patriots of Act 746. Tim, it's always great to have you. Good morning.
Good morning, Paul. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. Let's talk a little bit about this verdict. We have the Conduit News Facebook page posted this about 17 hours ago, that Kirby Ward was found not guilty on carrying a weapon charge in Greenbrier. Judge finds that Ward was on a journey as he was traveling from another county. But the judge stated that Act 746 causes confusion and did not rule on unlawful intent portion of the statute. Now, I find this, I'm happy for Kirby. We knew he was on a journey, that's for sure. I mean, because he was, and there was no way the judge was going to convict him here. But my question is, I was disappointed because I was hoping he was going to rule on the second section of Act 746 that essentially said, and you know what, it doesn't matter because, we can't prove that he was going to do anything with his gun that was illegal. You were in the courtroom yesterday in Greenbrier. Tell us what happened.
Well, Paul, I want to point out that I believe that patriots are 6 and prosecutors are 0. So this is like the 6th time that we've had not guilty verdicts in municipal courts so far since 2013 with 0 guilty verdicts. So we need to point that out. Now, what we can't get is something in circuit court to set a precedent. And yesterday was no different. The prosecutor up there in Greenbrier went out of his way to avoid the intent to unlawfully use the weapon against a person. He went straight to the defenses on 573-120, talking about, law enforcement officer or on a journey. And if you want to know the truth, I believe he went out of his way to make sure that it was a not guilty verdict so it didn't go to the circuit court. They were trying very hard to avoid, that next phase so that we can get a precedent set. And I think the judge used some carefully crafted language to ensure that.
Wow. So when the judge said that Act 746 causes confusion, I mean, I think it's only causing confusion because he's not willing to step up and just say what the law says. I mean, that's my opinion. What are your thoughts?
Well, I find that kind of funny, Paul, because they avoided the intent part of it so hard during the actual trial, but yet the judge wanted to say that it was confusing. I'll take him at his word that he's confused, but apparently he has difficulty reading the law because the law is not confusing. And even the prosecutor at one point said, Your Honor, I'm willing to admit that these officers may have made some wrong statements and may have been wrong whenever they were talking about Kirby, needed a permit. So, it's not confusing. They're trying to avoid actually deciding on what the law says. It's that manufactured confusion is continuing.
Remind our audience what exactly happened, because we may have some that don't remember. There was I guess dash cam footage of this exchange. Did they play that in court?
Yes, sir, they did. Kirby was stopped up in Greenbrier for, let's see, he had expired tags on his vehicle, and he got stopped for that reason. And as the officer was approaching his vehicle, Kirby had got some bad advice, and he had taken his weapon out of his waistband, out of the holster, and cleared the weapon and set it on the dash. And clearing the weapon, I mean, he dropped the magazine and locked the slide to the rear. The officer heard that, and you can hear that on the dash cam footage. As the officer was probably 15, 20 feet from the car, you heard the slide go to the rear. And it scared Mr. Emerton, the officer. Scared him, understandably so. It was probably not the smartest thing to do. But that really is what led to this entire encounter. You can tell with the interaction on the body cam footage that Mr. Emerton was pretty upset, and Kirby was very respectful. Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, sir. Mr. Emerton and the chief, they were both present, and they were pretty disrespectful to Kirby. They said some pretty harsh things to him. At one point, Kirby said, "Mr. Emerton, are you really taking my gun?" Mr. Emerton said, "If you're too stupid to know not to rack that slide to the rear when I'm coming up to your car, you're too stupid to own a gun." Comments like that throughout the interaction was played right in the courtroom, which was, it showed that they knew he didn't violate the law.
Yes.
But they were upset with what happened to start it.
Yeah. He hadn't broken any law. They were just, they just disapproved. They had a personal preference, okay? And it's probably a personal preference that all of us might have if we were law enforcement officers, but they were putting their personal preferences above what the law said. And that is bad law enforcement, in my opinion.
It is, Paul, and the judge kind of helped that along by continuing that indoctrination that when Mr. Emerton was testifying, he said that you need to tell the law enforcement if you get stopped that you're armed. That's not true. Now, if you have a concealed carry permit, yes, you do if they ask. But we have Fourth Amendment and Fifth Amendment and Second Amendment rights, and you have no duty to disclose if you don't have a permit. And we just need to start learning what the law is and what the law says and what our rights are. And this is just a classic case of manufactured confusion. I want to go a little bit further. Mr. Emerton knew that Kirby didn't break the law. He got mad, he got scared, and he charged him falsely with this. He confiscated his weapon. He kept him standing for 45 minutes detained on the side of the road. Kirby missed his children, very young, 6 years old. They had to get off the bus and sit there and wait for him 40 minutes by themselves, unsupervised. There's a lot of stuff that went on, and they did it just because they got scared. And that needs to stop. Like I said, we're 6-0. There hasn't been a single conviction that's been challenged. These prosecutors and these officers need to stop that because it's breeding an atmosphere of distrust with law enforcement officers.
You're exactly right, and I love how you keep repeating that statistic. We're 6-0. They're not convicting people for possession of a weapon, and yet we can't get an actual ruling on the part that decriminalizes carrying a weapon. And that would be the ultimate goal here. Instead, they did rely on the journey provision, and I guess I can understand why the judge relied on the journey provision here, because it is in the beginning. It's the most obvious one here because he was actually on a journey. He was outside of his county. I would have loved to get the judge to address the fact, the ridiculousness of if you just rely on the journey provision, are you supposed to throw your gun out the window when you get back in your home county? I mean, what do you do for if you live in the middle of the county, from the county line to your home, are you breaking the law now? The answer is obviously no, you're not, because the whole thing is decriminalized.
The body cam footage, Kirby told the officers that he was coming back from a job, that he was on a journey, and the chief of police asked him where he had been, and he told him. And the chief told him, said, "Son, that's not a journey. You were at work," which obviously neither officer knew the law or they were lying, one of the two.
Yeah.
And so the journey was a no-brainer. He was on a journey. And I wish they would have addressed the intent, but I believe they had no intention when this trial started. They had no intention of addressing that. What they were doing, there was 25 to 30 patriots there in the courtroom. They knew we were there. And the prosecutor continued to go out of his way to talk about how Greenbrier is not anti-gun. And, Mr. Emerton, how do you feel about people carrying guns? And we're not just arresting folks for carrying. And
it sounds like
which is funny. But
Tim, it sounds like they put him through this trial just to admonish him. They knew they couldn't prove he had done anything wrong, but it sounds like they were just wanting to admonish him or slap him on the wrist or make his life a little inconvenient because he exercised his right.
Well, at one point, Mr. Emerton, Kirby said, "I carry every day," and Mr. Emerton, the officer, said, "I'm the only one that's supposed to be carrying a gun." I think that says everything we need to know about their attitude about citizens carrying a weapon.
Wow. Yeah, that's, I've talked to some law enforcement officers before, and they firmly believe that the more people out there that have guns, the easier their job is in terms of law-abiding citizens, and that's a shame that we have some law enforcement who believe that they're the only ones that need to have a gun. That is very scary, especially in Arkansas. I wonder, Tim, have these law enforcement officers, they're certainly the kids not being picked up on time, left unsupervised, them intentionally charging him with something that wasn't, where he didn't break the law. Have they opened themselves up to a lawsuit here?
Well, I'm going to say that Mr. Emerton is not going to have qualified immunity if Kirby pursues civil action, and the chief won't either. They willfully disregarded the law. They charged him falsely and knowingly charged him falsely. They confiscated his private property when he didn't commit a violation. They put him through some pain and suffering. He's had to miss work. And I want to add something here. They knew he didn't do it, but they had to pay for a public defender. They had to pay for the judge's time, the officer's time in the courtroom. Kirby had to go twice to court for this. The prosecutor's money and time. They've wasted Greenbrier's money when they knew he didn't commit a crime. So you're asking, does he have a civil case? Well, yes, and I don't care if he wins a nickel. I certainly hope he pursues it, because Mr. Emerton and the Chiefs need to face the same type of repercussions and punishment that Kirby did. Kirby needs to have his day in court. They need to miss time off of work. They need to be facing, some type of discipline. I call upon the mayor of Greenbrier because obviously the Chief's not going to write himself up, but there needs to be some type of discipline that goes along with this and say, hey, guys, don't do this.
Yeah. You wasted you wasted taxpayer money here. Just so what? I mean, you could exercise your power as a deputized good old boy. I mean, that pretty much seems like what happened here. We're talking with Tim Loggins. All right, you said something a second ago, Tim, about one of the officers said, if that's what you do with a gun, then you're too stupid to own a gun. So I think this is a great segue into the governor of the state of Arkansas says he's open to red flag laws. He's open to red flag laws. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, wouldn't they love, through, quote, due process. You've got to have due process, though, to take away Kirby Ward's weapon because he did something that made the officers uncomfortable but didn't break the law, but it's a gray area, so you know what? We're just going to take your weapons for a while. I mean, with what we have just witnessed here with this trial yesterday, and really what is just a formality, they charged him, they knew he didn't break the law. I don't have any faith in these red flag laws not affecting good law-abiding citizens.
Well, Paul, I think that is the next battle we're going to be facing here in Arkansas. The governor came out and said he was open to red flag laws, and immediately the usual suspects, and by that I mean Bob Ballinger and Nate Bell and Charlene Fife. They started, and several others. They started Facebook and social media posts about under what conditions it would be acceptable for red flag laws. And what that really is a trial balloon. The governor said he's open to it, so they're putting a message out there, trying to shape the message so that the sheep, us, will be acceptable to it in February when they run the bill. Nate Bell in particular and Bob Ballinger, they were both saying that it's inevitable that red flag laws are coming to Arkansas. And my real question to that, Paul, is we have a trifecta, a Republican trifecta in Arkansas. If it's so inevitable, there is not a single bill that can be passed without Republican support.
Yep.
Why are red flag laws inevitable?
Yep.
And let's just, in case folks don't know what a red flag law is, it is a violation of due process. Let's be very clear about that. Someone alleges you're a danger. They knock on your door. They handcuff you. They confiscate your weapons. They mandate that you go undergo counseling or you get locked up or whatever. And there's not any proof that you've committed a crime. They're doing it because someone said you may commit a crime in the future. And this is just some false flags to start infringing in a different way upon our rights to carry a weapon. And when we say we got a Republican governor and a Republican majority in the legislature, we need to be very careful when we say that, because I don't think that's true. What we have is some folks that are saying they're Republican, but they don't believe in individual rights. But because they got an R beside their name, we're voting for them. And we've got to be very careful on this because, violation of the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Second Amendment, the 14th Amendment, red flag laws are constitutional violations, and there is no way that you can have due process. Mm-hmm. Think about that. Really think about that. They're going to confiscate your property because you may commit a crime in the future?
That's exactly right, and that's the problem.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but they'll put all these, and I've got Representative Ballinger's Facebook post up, and he is basically listing the ways he would support a red flag law, which is just really disappointing. Of course, he's now Senator-elect Bob Ballinger, and so that's a big deal. I understand he deleted some of your Facebook comments. What's that about?
On his Facebook, his personal Facebook page, I called upon him to commit to standing against red flag laws and standing against the governor if necessary. He responded to it on Facebook and said, you know, I don't have a direct quote, but he said, Tim, you're one of those people that did not support me, and I don't owe you an explanation, and I don't owe you an answer. And when I responded, he deleted that and blocked me. Mm-hmm. He later, I went to his Senate page, and I said, you know, hey, Bob, it seems that my comments were accidentally deleted, so I'm going to call on you again to please pledge to not support red flag laws, and he deleted that. He deleted several of my comments and just wouldn't. He refuses to have that conversation. And Paul, the reason is he wasn't. He was trying to. It was a trial balloon for the law for the governor.
Yeah.
His post was all about shaping the message, seeing what our response was, so that they could tailor that. In February or January.
Yeah,
that's all it was
they
about.
want to know what
our
exactly. They want to get out. They want to know what our response is, so that they can craft their language to combat our outrage, so that they know they can go to these Republicans. I mean, we have a Republican governor, a Republican representative, Bob Ballinger, and going to be senator coming out for red flag laws. I mean, it's the twilight zone. I mean, it's anti-Republican Party platform. It's nuts, and they're going to try to figure a way to do this for some reason. Now, I want to say something here, because I know for a fact, okay, that that the enhanced carry mess that we're dealing with right now, that is a garbage piece of legislation that was done. They destroyed Charlie Collins' bill for political reasons, for political calculations, and they had this enhanced carry. I know for a fact that Bob Ballinger had this bill a long time before, or according to sources, a long time before, that this was already written up in advance, okay? So I got a feeling that these red flag laws are probably already written up in advance. Now, have you heard that before, Tim, that the enhanced carry legislation existed a long time before there was the Charlie Collins controversy with, professors being able to carry or not?
Well, Paul, let me put it this way. You've been to the Marble Palace. You know that you don't write a bill in a day. And that bill was either already written or Bob Ballinger wrote it in the wee hours of the night. Now, which one do you think is believable? He had that bill already written.
Well, I have a source, that had seen it. I'm spitballing here, but a year earlier, it had already been floated, the actual, legislation. So, I mean, this was all planned, and I think the red flag laws are already being planned too. And the Republicans will absolutely love the leftist attention they'll get from this. I mean, the press will promote this, and in turn be promoting them politically. And they love. I mean, some big government Republicans or people who have that tendency, they enjoy the mainstream media complimenting them. I mean, it's that John McCain used to really like it, and everything else. I mean, you can see different examples, but I mean, it's really frustrating. Do we have Second Amendment rights or don't we, Tim?
Well, obviously we do, and those rights aren't granted by government. They're granted by God. They're inalienable. And regardless of what law they try to pass, guess what? God gave me these rights. The government can either try to infringe them or they can acknowledge my God-given rights. Right now, they're trying to infringe upon them. That's really how it is. Now, the good news is, Paul, we've seen an explosion in our membership since the governor said he's open to red flag laws. The Northeast chapter, we've gained 150 members in the last 7 days.
Wow.
The main page has gained 180 or 200 in the last 7 days. Southeast Arkansas, we're gaining membership because folks are waking up and saying, wow, our rights really are under threat.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would also make I would make the connection here if we kind of backtrack where they say, well, red flag laws are coming to Arkansas one way or another, and we need to make sure we write them the good way. Isn't that what they said about Obamacare? Well, Obamacare is the law of the land, and we've got to figure out a way. We got to pass laws and cooperate with it. I mean, no, you don't. You you simply don't. Like you said, the Republicans control everything. You don't have to go against Second Amendment rights. You don't have to do this. Anyway, I'll give you the last word, Tim.
Well, Paul, we the good news is our membership is growing. We're becoming more active. We're getting the message out. We're educating more and more Arkansans. The bad news is that we have never been under more attack on the possibility of being infringed upon here in the state of Arkansas, and that's a shame because, gun rights is low-hanging fruit for conservatives.
Yeah.
And we've got to get that message out because folks think we've got, Republicans in charge, so everything's good.
Yeah.
We need to start looking at what folks are doing instead of what they're saying.
Do you think this is a punishment for the pro-gun community in Arkansas? I know we have to go to break, but do you think this is a punishment for the pro-gun community in Arkansas that supported Jan Morgan instead of Asa?
Absolutely it is, and there's going to be more punishment coming down the pipe. I look for them to try to clarify Act 746. As the judge said, it's confusing. I look for them to try and gut it in January.
Yeah, they'll try to gut that too.
Bob already tried to run that bill last session, and I look for him to dust it off and pull it back out again and try to gut our rights and say you must have a permit and
Tim Loggins,
permission.
I appreciate it, sir. Thank you so much. We've got to go. We were out of time. It's always great to have you, folks. It's Patriots of Act 746. Search for them on Facebook. Back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com.
Amendment that the voters in most part have already approved in 2 landslide elections. That's the choice in November.
Yeah, and you know what? When you put it in those terms, I mean, how do you not vote for this thing? And look, I think this thing is going to pass because of what the people have done in the past, because of the will of the voters. It's an honest ballot title. It says what it is. It says what it's going to do. It has the word term limit in the ballot title, which the other ones you had to read in it was an ethics amendment and that sort of thing. It was extremely deceptive. Now I do want to talk about the opposition to this, Tim, because you do have the Chamber of Commerce. We were just talking about this. The Chamber of Commerce CEO Randy Zook has formed a ballot committee to oppose issue 3. Do you think there's going to be a lawsuit?
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
If they were to gut Act 746, I'm just telling you right now, the reason they're even considering it, they're considering red flag laws and everything else, is because they are absolutely the establishment, the people who are loyal to those who are at the top of the power structure, the top of the heap, so to speak, are emboldened. They think that there are no consequences for violating the Republican Party platform or limited government or individual rights because, honestly, there really haven't been any consequences for them politically. The only thing they understand is losing power. That's the only thing they understand. And you're seeing it. They're going after gun rights, apparently. This is my fear. They're going after great organizations like the Family Council, and they're willing to just essentially burn a bridge because you disagree on one issue, just one. You're, threatening veiled threats or outright threats of not supporting pro-life legislation ever again from Family Council just because you disagree on one issue on the tort reform. Unbelievable. We can agree to disagree as long as we get what we want, is what they say, but we can't agree to disagree if there's a chance we'll lose.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk, 101.3 FM and 1230 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
I mean, it says right here that the purpose is to advocate for the disqualification or defeat. Do you think they're going to use the courts to try to disqualify the term limits amendment?
Of course they will, because any group of folks that is deceptive enough to put this on the ballot without a debate, with campaign of silence, does not want this to go to the Arkansas voters. So I predict that they will try to sue to take this away from the voters so that the voters cannot make a decision on this. This whole issue has been a deception on the part of the legislature, on the part of the lobbyists, and we need to say no to it. But we are going to have to fight this in court because they cannot stand for this to get to the ballot.
I mean, it's gonna severely, I think, curtail, the power structure down there. It's going to change things in a big way, and they certainly don't want that. I'm curious as to what their arguments are going to be, though, because it's not as if there are multiple issues. It's in one ballot, that could get it or in one initiative that could get it disqualified, but that's not here. It's very simple. I'm just curious what they may do to get this thing, up to the Supreme Court or something like that. And I'm like you, we always hear from legislators who want to raise taxes, but they don't want to go on record for raising taxes. They'll say, well, I didn't vote to raise taxes. I just voted to put it on the ballot to let the people decide. The people need to decide this. It's the people. Well, you know what? That's the same thing here, right? Let's use that same argument. Let the people decide. What do you want? You want 16 years or possibly 22 years if you get, play your cards right, or do you want the 10-year term limits? Go ahead, Tim.
Well, I just think that's right, and I think the people need to decide. We wouldn't be here at this point today if they had been honest with their ballot title and let the people decide in 2014. They are the ones that decided to hide this legislation on page 16 of an unrelated amendment. In the same amendment, they also tripled their pay. They didn't want voters to have a decision on that either because they did not announce that. They did not publicize it. This has been a travesty of legislation. And it's time that we look to the voters to make this decision and not to the legislators. And it's interesting that they will always, and I've heard this constantly, well, lobbyists are going to be empowered. Well, does the Chamber of Commerce not know that? Because the Chamber of Commerce is our opposition. Every lobbyist will be our opposition here. I wish they'd stop saying something that they know is false. Lobbyists hate term limits. That's the truth.
Yeah, they have to if you got a new legislator, you have to reforge that relationship. I imagine that's more expensive on the front end.
Well, it is, and they do have to work harder. They have to explain their issues to legislators, and they have to try to convince them on the merits of their issue. They cannot promise a political career, and that takes an arrow out of the quiver of lobbyists.
Wow, yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
It's really important that we determine who is going to make the rules of term limits in the state of Arkansas. Are we going to let the voters do it, or are we going to let lobbyists and legislators do it?
Tim,
that's our choice in November. And I encourage everyone to stand up for our rights. The people rule. That's the motto of our state. Let's make sure that the people rule in November and not legislators and lobbyists with a campaign of silence and deception. It's very important that we make this stand and give a loud voice to term limits in our state.
Tim Jacob, I want you to go ahead and give the website if people want more information, want to support you guys. I mean, I understand if there's going to be a lawsuit, which we probably think there is, that's going to cost money to defend, correct?
That is true, and the powerful are going to have the deep pockets. It's the people versus the powerful on this issue, but our website is arkansastermlimits.org. I encourage you to go to it, get some information from it. Please help fund us. We need that funding desperately. We are going up against the most powerful people in our state. We're going up against the most powerful legislators in our state, this is the voice of the people, and I'd like to thank 135,000 Arkansans that signed this.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
It's hour number 2. We just came off a great interview with Tim Loggins from the Patriots of X746 last hour at 6:33. You can check it out, get the podcast or the video archive up at conduitnews.com. When you go to conduitnews.com, you just want to click on Conduit News Radio, and that's going to give you today's show, videos, and things like that. Check it out. Also on the front page of conduitnews.com, the brand new conduitnews.com, we have this headline, Tim Jacob on term limits. This was an interview from yesterday. It's time we look to the voters and not the legislature. Speaking of term limits. We also have our interview, Dr. Michael Busler. Trump is doing what any business person would do. It's a fantastic interview about President Donald Trump and why the economy is doing so well. And on Friday, we interviewed Jan Morgan and have her reaction to Governor Asa Hutchinson being open to red flag gun control laws. Those are just a few of the clips that you can get, share with your friends. We want you to tell everyone in your sphere of influence about Conduit News and what we're trying to do, which is give people information that they're not getting anywhere else, a conduit from the power structure of the capital and your government to the people. All right. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, we're going to be talking with Maria Espinosa. We're thrilled to have her back on the show. She is the president or the director. Is she the president or the director? Anyway, she's the head of the Remembrance Project. And this is a project that is out there to remember those people who have been murdered by illegal aliens here in the United States. Now, she happens to be on when this is in the news. There was an illegal alien who has now been charged and arrested for the death of a 20-year-old Iowa college student. Her name was Molly Tibbetts. She was found in a cornfield. During a joint law enforcement press briefing yesterday, police officials revealed, according to Breitbart News' John Bender, that Tibbetts' body was found in a cornfield in the rural area of central Iowa, and that 24-year-old illegal alien, Christian Bahena Rivera, has been charged with murder in her death. According to police, Rivera was the last person who saw Tibbetts jogging on the evening of July 18th in Brooklyn. The illegal alien told police that Tibbetts was jogging on July 18th when he saw her. Oh, I saw the Washington Post report on this. Illegal alien? No. It was just a simple headline. Molly Tibbetts' death, or it was undocumented immigrant charged in Molly Tibbetts' death. Undocumented immigrant. Really? No, he's an illegal alien, and he's been living here for anywhere between 4 and 7 years, according to reports. The illegal alien told police that Tibbetts was jogging on July 18th when he saw her. That's when he said he approached Tibbetts and started talking to her, even running alongside her and behind her. What a creep. What a creeper this guy is. Tibbetts, according to the illegal alien story, said he needed to get away from her or she would call the police. Well, that apparently made the illegal alien mad. Tibbetts then started running, and that's when Rivera said he chased her down. For you people on the left that look at everything socially as a victim and oppressor, you got to have a victim, you got to have an oppressor. This is what an oppressor and a victim actually is, just so you know. This is an actual prey/predator situation where there is an oppressor and there is a victim. Not this social engineering, male white privilege victim oppressor, this attempt, according to Jordan Peterson, to basically whitewash history and try to start Marxism and talk about how great Marxism is again by dividing us into all these different groups, victim, all this stuff. This is an actual victim and an actual oppressor. So he decided to run her down because she decided to run off, get away from him. Police say Rivera told law enforcement that after this, he blacked out, and eventually Tibbetts' body was placed in a cornfield in the town of Brooklyn, Iowa, somewhere in the area. Police also said they first came into contact with the illegal alien yesterday. Police officials said that security camera footage was critical in charging the illegal alien with the murder of Tibbetts. Police have said they do not yet know a motive. For whatever reason, he chose to abduct her. Again, Maria Espinoza will be on at the bottom of the hour. It's frustrating because this is a death that is preventable if you have stronger borders. That's not to say that no illegal alien will ever come in here again, but we obviously have a huge problem in this country. And this is one of the reasons why you have to build the wall, and you have to secure the border, and you have to, stop this nonsense of essentially claiming, America is the greatest country in the world, and yet we can't secure our border. It doesn't make sense. The government, for too long, under Democrat administrations and under Republican administrations, has abdicated the responsibility of keeping this country safe, while at the same time inventing new social programs and new obligations that they have to take care of when they can't even do the basic things right. It's unbelievable. All right, so we'll talk about that a little later. Over at the Arkansas Times, this is David Ramsey. The headline, "The Saga of Rusty Cranford, the man in the middle of Arkansas's vast public corruption scandal." So this is essentially, this was written on, where's the date on this? August 16th. This is a great piece, and it really goes a long way to remind us of really just how interwoven this whole thing is. So Rusty Cranford, just so you know, was arrested on February 21st of 2018. And he had $17,700 in cash on him. He also had a revolver on him. And he had some Xanax, some Ambien, and some hydrocodone. This guy was in a self-destructive pattern, considering that I believe it was the day before he was arrested. He went to a friend of his who's a convicted felon and made a murder-for-hire proposition to try to kill a man by the name of Don Jones. Don Jones is a lobbyist who pled guilty back in December of 2017 to essentially bribing, being part of a, I guess, stealing taxpayer dollars through Medicaid is essentially what it is. But it has to do with the Missouri group Preferred Family Health Care that Arkansas has finally now terminated the contracts we had with them for providing services. So, it's a huge, huge piece of Rusty Cranford's like in the middle of it all. He's in the middle. I mean, he connects to Jeremy Hutchinson, to Michael Lamoureux, to Jake Files. He connects to the whole Ecclesia thing. He connects to the John Woods thing, which John Woods then is going to connect to the Ecclesia situation. I mean, the corruption is unbelievable. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure Arkansas Times put together a flow chart here that I saw, which was interesting. Let me see if we can find the flow chart, because it actually is extremely confusing, but the flow chart makes it. The flow chart leaves some things out that I would put in. There's also a part in this piece where they give a lot of detail, a little bit more detail about the murder for hire. That's what I'm interested in. This is the one thing that is glossed over. A guy who was the linchpin, Rusty Cranford, at the Marble Palace, was a connector, was a guy that was known to get things done. This lobbyist, Rusty Cranford, was in it so deep, he tried to have a guy murdered, according to the government. Scroll down to the part of this Arkansas Times piece by David Ramsey where it says he needs to be gone, Joe. This was the part I thought was interesting. David Ramsey writes, by 2017, Preferred Family Healthcare's leadership had been informed that the nonprofit was subject to a federal investigation. On June 2nd, Cranford signed a settlement agreement terminating his contract. As part of the settlement, Preferred Family Healthcare forgave a $35,000 debt. Cranford failed to reimburse Preferred Family Healthcare after a Missouri state senator returned an unlawful campaign contribution that Cranford had made on the nonprofit's behalf. Repaid him $165,000 for personal expenditures, and he described as reasonable legal fees and expenses on matters subject to company advancement, and paid him a final settlement of $400,000. According to Cranford's attorneys, the feds undertook a relentless pursuit of Mr. Cranford, trying again and again over a period of years to get him to cooperate. That pressure has continued to escalate, his attorney Nathan Garrett told a judge in March 2018 when Cranford initially pled not guilty. Then, of course, he took a plea and pled guilty. They have sought his cooperation repeatedly, each time upping the ante, each time suggesting that Mr. Cranford's situation is worse than it was the last time. Well, it is. I mean, they apparently, according to them, have recordings, because the guy was wearing a wire, or recording in some way, of him propositioning to hire for the murder of the New Jersey lobbyist Don Jones. When his co-conspirator Jones pled guilty in December, Cranford knew that the noose was tightening. He complained to an old family friend that Jones had cut himself a deal and was a can't say that one, was a snitching, let's just say, MFer. How about that? Snitching. Wow. Snitches get stitches. Unfortunately for Cranford, David Ramsey goes on, this old acquaintance who had known Cranford's father and Cranford in his youth was a confidential FBI informant who was secretly recording his conversations with Cranford. He's referred to as Uncle X. Uncle X. Not Senator A. Yeah, Uncle X is not, he's not the uncle. You know what I'm saying? This is Uncle X. This is a relationship to Cranford. What we need to make that clear. During rambling conversations with Uncle X, Cranford said that the feds believed he had significant political clout. He boasted that a few years prior he had managed to arrange an early release from prison for an old high school buddy who was locked up on a murder charge. After Cranford was hired by the family to help, I got an expletive that killed somebody. Just got him out of prison, Cranford told Uncle X. He killed a boy in Fouke, Arkansas. Is that how you say Fouke? I'm mispronouncing it, but I've never been there. So about 7 years ago, wrapped him up in a rug and threw him in a Mercer bayou down there. So he's bragging about getting somebody out of jail early. Interesting. Then you get to the meeting where he said he needs to be gone, referring to Don Jones. He needs to be gone, meaning, take care of him. The sound of Cranford flipping through cash is audible towards the end of the recording as the two arrange to meet again. According to Uncle X, Cranford gave him $500 as an initial down payment on a planned agreement to murder Jones. When Cranford was arrested, in addition to the .45 caliber pistol, prescription pills, and $17,700 in cash, federal agents found 2 loan request forms for $10,000 from the cash value of his life insurance policy. Later investigation revealed that the pistol had been illegally purchased by someone with a felony conviction in the fall of 2013. Boy, so he's getting weapons. Wow, red flag laws would have really helped here, right? He gave Cranford the gun later that year, around Christmas. The man who gave him the gun is now incarcerated in the Federal Bureau of Prisons for an unrelated crime. Prosecutors would later argue that it's very well suited for use as a murder weapon. Listen, guys, this is nuts. So Cranford eventually pleads because they're not going to let him out on bail after they arrest him for trying to have somebody murdered, right? So he's sitting there in jail, and he's sitting there in jail. He gets arrested in February, and he's sitting there in jail, and guess what? Jail's no fun. You start thinking, my goodness, how long am I going to be here? You know what? I know I've done terrible things, but and maybe, you're detoxing. You don't have your hydrocodones anymore. You don't have all that, and maybe you finally have a little bit more of a clear head, and you think, I'd like to have some sort of, I'd like to have some sort of hope of getting out of here in 10 years. That would be nice. So, you make a plea. And in that plea, Rusty Cranford alleges that he paid Jeremy Hutchinson, the governor's nephew, $500,000 over the course of several years. And to date, Jeremy Hutchinson hasn't been charged with anything. So this is my question. And this, by the way, this also exposes, eventually, you've got Michael Lamoureux because you had the guy in South Arkansas, Joe Walsh, who has pled guilty as well. And he exposes Michael Lamoureux, the governor's former chief of staff and former Senate president. What was the guilty plea for? I guess that's my question is this. And you know what? There may be Missouri prosecutors that are scratching their head wondering what is going on in Arkansas. We essentially gift wrapped you this thing, and the Arkansas prosecutors haven't done anything with it. So what is going on in Arkansas? What's the guilty plea for? Why does Rusty Cranford, why does he take a plea deal? And why does he roll? But then nothing happens to who he gives the information up on about the $500,000. Nothing has happened yet. It's very frustrating, and I would just say, to Dak Keys, Cody Highland, the people of Arkansas desperately need confidence restored back in their government, and ethics reform or rule changes are not going to help the situation if there's actually been crimes committed. So anyway, this thing goes on. The flow chart, though, I can't find the flow chart. I'm going to find it during the break. How about that? Because it's a highlighted thing. I need to show it to you. We're going to take a break, though. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, we're going to be talking about this illegal immigrant who was charged with the death of an Iowa 20-year-old college student. We'll be back in just a moment. It's always a pleasure. Listen, I think term limits is a good idea. I think taking it from 16 down to 10 is a good idea. I know there are other people that disagree. They can make arguments to the contrary, and, I respect those people, and I can respectfully disagree with them and agree to disagree and hopefully work together on other issues. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. There does seem to be some legislators out there who are, coming out and saying, listen, we think this is a terrible idea.
Well, I think it's a great thing, and I'm very grateful that we're having this debate this time, because in 2014, when the legislature put through that fraudulent amendment and deceptive amendment, we did not have that debate. So I'm glad that after a 3-year bout of laryngitis that some of them have gotten their voice back. And I think it's healthy when we debate this statewide. Good people can disagree about this, but everyone can agree that deception.
Good morning. Good morning. Congratulations, you have made it to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, where we strive to offer politicians the very best in ambiguously specific language, the purpose of which is to allow our politician bosses to grow government and keep their constituents in the dark. This yields 2 beneficial outcomes. First, the government-growing politicians stay in office, and second, we at the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language get to remain in the shadows and get to keep our jobs. Now, it's time for technocrat training drills. Johnny?
Yes?
A politician wants to use the healthcare system to punish those who have and redistribute their wealth. What is the appropriate language to use in this situation to make an unpopular idea acceptable to the public?
I would emphasize that these ideas would make their healthcare more affordable and make sure the public understands if they already have adequate healthcare, nothing will change for them.
Very good, Johnny. Much progress since last time. Next up, let's have Susie. Susie, your politician has been caught in, dare I say it, a lie.
What kind of a lie?
It doesn't really matter, but in the spirit of the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, I will give you a good hypothetical scenario. Dozens of politicians have been thrown out of office for supporting a socialist health care program. So the remaining politicians get together and they pass a bill to, quote, end the program, end quote. But they really want to keep it. What should they do, Susie?
May I ask a question for more information?
Certainly.
Has the word lie been used by the political opposition?
Yes.
I know. They should change the name of the program. Maybe use the word works to make the sheeple think it's for working folk. Then they should go on the attack and get the public distracted. I would advise the politician to publicly question why our political dialogue has become so uncivilized and tell them to claim using the word lie, no matter how accurate, is a personal attack on his or her character. And if they admit to any wrongdoing at all, they must replace the word lie with words like misspoke, misstatement, misrepresent, or mislead.
Amazing! Excellent work, Susie. I feel like the student has really become the teacher. You will make a terrific addition to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language.
All hands on deck. This is a Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language emergency. Several politicians are scrambling after being exposed by some talk radio host. Let's move it, people. They need our help.
The Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language. You vote 'em in, and we keep 'em in. PHP Parody.
I found the flow chart. It's pretty good. I'm going to throw it up there for you here in just a sec. We only have like a minute and a half. Show them this flow chart, Joe. And again, Rusty Cranford's the middle. I started to make one. I have one that I wrote out. This is very similar. Matter of fact, when I saw this flow chart, I thought to myself, has somebody been in my studio? Because I was making one myself. You see Milton Rusty Cranford right there at the middle. And it connects to Robin Ravindran, whatever. I don't know. Are you having trouble sleeping? Take some Ravindran. He's been charged, okay? But, like, look at all the people who've pled guilty, okay? Rusty Cranford pled guilty. Former Senator Eddie Cooper pled guilty, or Representative Cooper. John Woods was convicted. Mike O'Neill pled guilty. Jeremy Hutchinson hasn't been charged. Michael Amaro hasn't been charged. Hank Wilkins pled guilty. Jerry Walsh. Didn't he plead guilty? Yeah, I'm pretty sure he took a plea. That needs to be updated. Scrolling up. Who else do we have here? Up to the top. It's all connected to PFH, Preferred Family Health Care. Tom Goss, Bontia Goss, Marilyn Nolan. Then you've got the political consultant Don Jones. And there's actually more here. You could have a whole nother column from the John Woods thing, and you could really branch out. Not to mention Jake Files, DBH Consulting, all this other stuff, $80,000 for, nursing home bill. It's always a pleasure. Listen, I think term limits is a good idea. I think taking it from 16 down to 10 is a good idea. I know there are other people that disagree. They can make arguments to the contrary, and, I respect those people, and I can respectfully disagree with them and agree to disagree and hopefully work together on other issues. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. There does seem to be some legislators out there who are, coming out and saying, listen, we think this is a terrible idea.
Well, I think it's a great thing, and I'm very grateful that we're having this debate this time, because in 2014, when the legislature put through that fraudulent amendment and deceptive amendment, we did not have that debate. So I'm glad that after a 3-year bout of laryngitis that some of them have gotten their voice back. And I think it's a healthy when we debate this statewide. Good people can disagree about this, but everyone can agree that deception does not work in Arkansas and has no place in Arkansas politics. And that's exactly what the legislature and the lobbyists did in 2014.
And that is a great point, and I feel like that to me is the one reason, is probably my biggest motivator to vote for this. Aside from the fact, at the end of the day, it's like, hey, do you think 16 years is good, or do you think a decade is good? And I'm like, okay, a decade's fine. Let's, you go past a decade, it really can become a career, and not for career politicians. But the main thing here, and I've been trying to talk about this a little bit, is that what John Woods did, and, convicted felon John Woods, and now really the rest of the General Assembly too, and I know there were people that did speak out against it at the time, but like you said, there wasn't this kind of debate that we're having right now. Now we're having a much broader debate with more people involved. Our own government lied to the people intentionally. They intentionally, we can blame most of it on John Woods, but the fact is the rest of the General Assembly voted for it. They voted for the title, and it went there. It was deceptive, and our own government lied to us, and now the people are taking the pendulum, and we're attempting to swing it back. And I don't think anybody should be surprised by that. I think that's a healthy thing.
I tend to agree with you. I think it's very healthy, and let's be sure to point out that senators can now stay 22 years, depending on how those 2-year terms fall. 22 years is not a term limit. That's a limit that anybody who doesn't believe in term limits could live with. So it's gone from 22. And here is the question Arkansas voters have to ask themselves. Do we want to live by an amendment written in silence by a
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us this morning in the home stretch. I want to welcome back to the program. It was a privilege to have her on last time. We're really thrilled to have her on again here on Conduit News. Welcome back to the program. We have the National Director of the Remembrance Project, Maria Espinoza. Maria, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
You're very welcome, Paul. Thanks so much for having me on again.
I want to talk a little bit about this guy who was arrested while taking his wife, to have their baby. I want to get to that story because that's why we wanted to have you on to talk about this. But huge news yesterday. We have a legal alien charged with first-degree murder in the death of Molly Tibbetts. Your reaction to that, Maria?
Very saddened, Paul, and another preventable killing. And, to talk about the two is just fine with me because it shows the complete disregard for Americans who are being viciously murdered, it seems like every other day, by people who shouldn't be here in the first place. And you see how the media treats the illegal alien open border narrative, which is a husband and wife going to a scheduled C-section to deliver both husband and wife now, both are illegally in the country. They have 5 children, 3 of whom were born here, so they are anchor babies, and yet the media centers on that issue and completely ignores the fact that this illegal alien father is wanted for murder in Mexico. Now, compared to what we found out yesterday, a young lady stalked and killed. Stalked might be a harsher word, but he certainly followed this young lady, would not leave her alone, and suddenly he blacks out and he has her in his trunk of the vehicle and dumps her body. He attacked Molly Tibbetts, 20-year-old Iowa University student, in a town of 1,400 of a population. Any town, a town much smaller than many of us probably live in, and you would think that you would be safe in this small town, Midwest Iowa, and here this illegal alien who was here from Mexico, and I'm reading all the reports trying to find out how he could remain here in the country and work and be e-verified and here given access to Molly. And I doubt, Paul, that this is his first offense, violent offense. I think if we look back and dig in these records, this individual, number one, should not be here. And I want to see proof that Yerby Farms out there in Iowa, in Brooklyn, Iowa, actually did verify that this guy was here legally. So he can't be here legally and be an illegal alien.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, this is it's preventable. I mean, and that's what's so frustrating here is that, you know, we've had administration after administration ignore this problem. They'll talk about it maybe sometimes, but now we have President Trump who's serious, wants to actually do something about it. We need Congress to act. These are preventable deaths. That's what the Remembrance Project is all about, folks, and you need to check them out. It's theremembranceproject.org, and we're talking with the National Director, Maria Espinoza. What I found it interesting with the couple that's got the scheduled C-section on the way to the hospital, he gets arrested. The media, so upset. We can't believe ICE would do this. We can't believe that they would tear families apart. And he's wanted for murder. I mean, he has an outstanding warrant for his arrest in Mexico on homicide charges. So
absolutely,
I mean, and yet they call this guy yesterday, who is now charged with the death of Molly Tibbetts, Maria. They call him an undocumented immigrant. They don't even use the term illegal alien. The Washington Post, is apologizing for this. They want to ignore the problem, and yet, how many more people are going to have to die? That's my question.
There must be a magic number. Exactly, and that's it. We say there must be a magic number that these elected officials have in mind, that they're okay with sacrificing American lives. And we have had it. This has gone on long enough. We've played their ridiculous political games where we're, like you mentioned, the mainstream media, how they report completely unbalanced. And we did a little look up on the articles that were for our side, I would say, for lawfulness and for protecting Americans. And it was like about 124 to 1 at the mainstream media pushed out there. So many stories for open borders and illegal aliens and separating their families when they completely ignored the permanent separation of American families. And we have children living in poverty, and the fake news, mainstream media talked about the undocumented minors that were in these detention centers where they had AC, fed 3 meals a day, and recreated. There is no comparison, Paul, and we as Americans have to say enough is enough, and we want. I'm to a point. I'm from Texas. I'm not for normally for having troops on the border. I do trust this administration, but I think it's high time that we have troops on that border. Turn those individuals around. Anyone that's trying to cross it, stop playing games. We have so many people here in our country that we don't know what what danger we're in. We truly don't know. And as you saw that camp out in New Mexico with 11 children and these individuals, Muslims, teaching them how to shoot up a school.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I did.
Yeah, I mean, how much longer are we going to sit back and wait, Paul? Like you mentioned, what is that magic number that they're okay of sacrificing American lives? And, we say also to these legislators to go home and gather your family, choose the child that you will sacrifice for someone else to have a better life, because many of our angel families have done that.
The border, the southern border in places, is one of the most dangerous places in the world. We have the violence, the sex trafficking, the drugs, the cartels. In many cases, they're using violent tactics that are more horrific than what we see in the Middle East. So, yeah, I mean, you say put troops on the border. I have thought about that as well. I mean, why not confront this problem with the full might of the American military? I mean, there are signs, Marie, I'm sure you know this, but there are signs on U.S. soil that warn citizens. Obama put them up. Hey, maybe you shouldn't take this road. Maybe you should take the northern route when you're going through parts of, that territory. That's embarrassing.
Arizona.
Yeah, Arizona. That is so embarrassing.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Exactly. I've been along that border, all along that border, and been to Arizona, of course, Texas border, been on night watch and have seen these illegal alien crossers with backpacks filled with drugs. But you're right. And it's if anyone goes to the border and sees how ridiculously we are trying to control that border, we have one instrument that detects any movement and has it's a camera, basically. It's a camera. And it's about 3 or 4 miles or more before there is another. They take that little contraption and then move it to another section. And, you can stand across the border and stand in Mexico and see the agents when they move this contraption. And you can see the agents for a long way in their vehicles. I mean, it's ridiculous. We wouldn't be guarding our own homes in that way. So enough is enough, Paul, and I think troops on that border stop the flow, and if they don't comply, then we have no alternative but to take measures in order to protect our southern border, just like Mexico protects its southern border. You will be shot if you are illegally crossing, unless, of course, they give you a visa to pass through their country to reach the United States.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking with Maria Espinoza. Just to reiterate, we have an illegal alien yesterday who was charged with the murder of Molly Tibbetts, a 20-year-old college student from the small town of Brooklyn, Iowa. We know that the man's name is Christian Bahena Rivera. He's been charged with murder, and essentially this is how it went down. The illegal alien told police that Tibbetts was jogging on July 18th when he saw her. That is when he said he approached Tibbetts and started talking to her, even running alongside her and behind her. Tibbetts, according to the illegal alien story, said he needed to get away from her or she would call the police. Tibbetts then started running, and that's when Rivera said he chased her down. Police say Rivera told law enforcement that after this, he blacked out, and eventually Tibbetts' body was placed in a cornfield in the Brooklyn area. This was, as I said earlier, Maria, the left is always obsessed with oppressor and victim when it comes to social situations. This is an actual oppressor-victim situation. And like you say, and like you try to make people aware with the Remembrance Project, this is preventable if we would just have an immigration policy that made sense.
Absolutely. And Americans are getting the short end of the stick every single time here. But this is just too much, Paul. We cannot allow another American family to go through this when our legislators are sitting on their hands and voting against the public, voting against for the constituent safety, only to take the blood money from these open border lobbyists to fill their reelection coffers while our children are filling America's coffins. This is what's taking place here right before our eyes. And we have a Facebook page that we posted the memorial banner for Molly, and it's go to the Remembrance Project and Stolen Lives Quilt on Facebook, the Remembrance Project and Stolen Lives Quilt, and you will see Molly's memorial panel there. We have nearly 400,000 people that we've reached, and we plan on printing and PDFing these comments and sending them to number one, to President Trump. I know he's very interested in and has been our only proponent in this fight for Americans. And we will print them out and PDF them and email them to leadership, because I put a lot of blame on Congress and especially the GOP leadership. And Democrats, Paul, I don't know. Maybe they're completely lost, and I don't see how any of the Democrats can even vote against the American people, the same people that they are supposedly represent. And they will sit on their hands and not vote for border security. And even the Republicans do this, and we need the people to help President Donald Trump in this effort to secure our country.
I know we're running out of time here, Maria, but one of the I would ask you this, in the context of what you just said, we do have the midterm elections coming up, and we need money for a border wall. We need Congress to comply. There's some, discussion that that's not going to happen. It may happen and everything else. But I'm pretty sure that if there is, for example, what they're calling a blue wave, that could really hurt President Trump's agenda trying to solve some of these problems. I mean, he's obviously interested in trying to solve problems in the long term.
Yes, he's doing everything he can, Paul. However, we do have these Republicans. We have the majority in the House and the Senate, and we have a great commander-in-chief. Yet we have those Republicans who refuse to secure our borders and who take money from the open border lobbyist groups. Now, that is unacceptable. I'm saying right now we should hold the line on these Republicans and for now, but I'm telling you, there has to be America First candidates that are on the ticket the next time around, because I think America is done with these wishy-washy politicians who rather take the blood money than do what's best for our country and our citizens.
That's very, very well said. I would tend to agree with that. Maria Espinoza, it's the Remembrance Project, folks. Check them out online. Can you give that website about the quilt one more time, Maria?
Yes, our Facebook page is the Remembrance Project and Stolen Lives Quilt. So our Stolen Lives Quilt are the banners that we memorialize Americans on. Our website is theremembranceproject.org.
All right. It's always great to have you on, Maria Espinoza, and I look forward to doing it again, because these things are going to keep happening, tragedy, but we've got to keep bringing people, making people aware of that. So I hope you have a great day, Maria.
Thank you, Paul. Reach out, and we'll schedule some families to speak on your radio show.
Yes, that's a great idea. Thank you. I appreciate that. Folks, it's
Conduit. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. It's Conduit News Radio. The number 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. Also broadcasting over at conduitnews.com, as well as facebook.com/conduitnews. You can sound off about the program there in the comments below. And we're going to take a break and be back here in just a moment.
If you believe the Second Amendment protects your right to defend your home with a firearm, where do you turn if the government confiscates your gun? To the courthouse. The Founding Fathers created your Seventh Amendment right to a civil jury to protect your freedoms. The courthouse is where you fight the overreaching hand of government. And the Brad Hendricks Law Firm is where the fight starts. Call the Brad Hendricks Law Firm at 501-221-0444. The Brad Hendricks Law Firm in Little Rock, standing ready using the Seventh Amendment to protect your Second Amendment rights. Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed roller lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
It's always a pleasure. You know, listen, I think term limits is a good idea. I think taking it from 16 down to 10 is a good idea. I know there are other people that disagree. You know, they can make arguments to the contrary. And, you know, I respect those people. And I can respectfully disagree with them and agree to disagree and hopefully work together on other issues. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. There does seem to be some legislators out there who are, you know, coming out and saying, listen, we think this is a terrible idea.
Well, I think it's a great thing, and I'm very grateful that we're having this debate this time, because in 2014, when the legislature put through that fraudulent amendment and deceptive amendment, we did not have that debate. So I'm glad that after a 3-year bout of laryngitis that some of them have gotten their voice back. And I think it's healthy when we debate this statewide. Good people can disagree about this, but everyone can agree that deception does not.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Welcome back. And this is from Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Joe, I'm going to send this to you because the folks need to see this one at home because it just got posted 3 hours ago. Headline: Billing Director at Care Provider arrested in Arkansas Medicaid fraud case. So as we were just talking about this, going over that Arkansas Times David Ramsey piece. Who's in the news again? What was I saying? I was saying, looks like we have corruption almost every day. And we see it in the headlines, and then yet here it is. And shout out to Reggie, who found this and posted it on the Facebook page. You should have it now. I just sent it. Eric Besson, a former Preferred Family Healthcare billing director, arrested on 2 felony counts of Medicaid fraud, received pay from an Arkansas lobbying firm and a separate mental health care provider, according to court documents. Helen Balding, 47, arrested Monday, was described in an investigator's affidavit as an accomplice to former company executive Robin Ravindran, who is accused of directing employees to improperly bill Medicaid. Ravindran was arrested June 29th on 2 felony counts of Medicaid fraud. He told Preferred Family employees by email to file forged claims totaling $2.3 million between January 2015 and October 2017. Balding is accused of carrying out that order despite knowing it was improper. Balding's last day of employment at Preferred Family was March 20th, said company spokesman. Balding was hired in November 2009 by Alternative Opportunities, which merged with Preferred Family in May 2015. Let's see. Is it going to mention Cranford here at some point? Balding received $59,000 from one lobbyist, Rusty Cranford, one of his firms, and $85,000 from a separate unnamed mental health Medicaid provider. Unnamed. Between January 2015 and December 2017. Balding also earned at least $194,000 in that 2-year span from Preferred Family Health Care, the affidavit says. Cranford and Ravindran arranged Balding's positions with these other entities according to the document, which was filed in Independence County Circuit Court on August 16th. It does not address whether her non-preferred family compensation was related to the fraud accusations. So we know Cranford earlier this year pled guilty. We just talked about that. Ravindran has been charged. One of Cranford's closest associates was Robin Ravindran. The full scope of their relationship is subject of an ongoing investigation involving multiple companies. Then, of course, is it going to go over? See, 4 former state lawmakers have pled guilty. Conspiracy and embezzlement charges stemming from 2 federal investigations, one in Arkansas and one in Missouri. Hey, that federal investigation in Arkansas, come on, you guys need to, come on. Get that thing moving. Get that thing moving. Though the FBI's initial tip fizzled, listen to this. This is interesting. The state's Medicaid fraud investigation began in 2016 after the FBI contacted Attorney General Leslie Rutledge's office, according to documents. The Attorney General's office filed the charges both against Ravindran and Balding in Independence County, though the FBI's initial tip fizzled because too much time had elapsed since the alleged crime. Rutledge's office said it learned that several providers under Medicaid fraud investigation, mostly in the field of mental health, were all connected to a small group of lobbyists and consultants. Swindle's affidavit says. So the Attorney General's Medicaid fraud unit opened one large investigation. Okay. There could be another leg to this. That's what I'm thinking. This could ensnare more than just the lobbyist Rusty Cranford. It's kind of what I guess I would be. I've heard that before, and now I'm reading it, and so, I mean, they say it's a small group of lobbyists, but folks, Little Rock is run by a small group of lobbyists. The Arkansas Department of Human Services discontinued Medicaid reimbursement to preferred family health care after all of this. In Balding's case, a probable cause affidavit says she fraudulently billed the free insurance program for children in low-income Arkansans despite knowing that state regulations require providers to verify that other insurers won't cover the costs. Balding, a former Fayetteville resident, surrendered Monday at Independence County, or to the jail there, and left after posting bond. Quote, the alleged actions of these former Alternative Opportunities leaders and employees do not reflect the integrity and values of preferred family health care. Blah, 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 blah. That's, you guys just need to shut the doors on preferred family health care, okay? Quit trying to at least change the name of your company. Good grief, don't treat us as if we're idiots. My goodness. Anyway, that's the news 3 hours ago by Eric Besson in the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Headline, billing director at care provider arrested in Arkansas Medicaid fraud case. Yeah, you know what? Listen, I know you have the AG here working, Leslie Rutledge working. We need the federal prosecutors involved here as much as they possibly can. Please restore faith in our government. I mean, we know the FBI's investigating Arkansas. We know they're here. We know they're. I was told the other day that they're still requesting documents from the Bureau of Legislative Research. We know that that's happening, but are you telling me that? I mean, this should be on the front page of the Gazette every day. that the law firm that the Bureau of Legislative Research hired to be the middleman between the FBI's request and the Bureau of Legislative Research here in Arkansas is the same law firm that's affiliated with, wait for it, Preferred Family Health Care at one time? Just something to think about. How did that get approved? Oh, the Legislative Council rubber stamped the request. That's how. Arkansas, be safe.